It is possible to become free from debt, financial worry, your boss, and your zip code. You can start living a life you love, but first, you need to find your freedom. Using financial independence and lifestyle design principles, you can create the life of your dreams now. There are many paths to freedom, and that is what this podcast is all about. My name is Becky from 20free.co, and I am the host of the Find Your Freedom podcast. A Purple Life recently turned 30, lives in Seattle, works in marketing, and has written about her journey to financial independence over the last 5 years at apurplelife.com. She is striving to retire from her full-time job in September of 2020 to eat her way across the world. She has been able to accelerate this goal by increasing her income through job hopping and decreasing her spending with domestic geo arbitrage. So how are you doing today, Purple?
I'm doing surprisingly well. How are you?
I'm good, considering this whole COVID pandemic thing. And there's been so much news coming out about the economy and about how the pandemic, which we don't know how long it's going to last, is going to affect people financially. So you are planning to retire early. Can you give me some background on your early retirement plans?
Yes, I was originally planning to quit my full-time job in September of this year. And I made that plan knowing that if the market doesn't cooperate, maybe that's not a retirement. Maybe that's a 2-decade sabbatical. Maybe that's some shorter fun employment. But just knowing the large impact that the market has on basically my net worth number, I made that plan. So we're basically in one of the worst case scenarios, but I'm still full steam ahead.
That's good to hear. So are there any changes that you're making to your early retirement plan? Are you still planning to quit on the date you were planning and with the approximate amount of money that you had planned?
Yes. So no changes for the actual date, still the end of September. However, caveating that with if the world looks as it does right now in September, I might just keep my cushy remote job for a couple of months, because if I'm sitting at home alone anyway, why not? That's not the retirement that I was looking forward to. So that's the only reason that I can think of that I would change my plans, obviously, depending on how quickly we can kick this virus's butt and reopen global borders. That will also impact my post-retirement plan. Originally, it was to start traveling the world. So maybe it'll be, if we're no longer self-quarantining, traveling the US, and just push that back a year or two. So no big changes there. Just might have less money on paper, but I still have the same number of stocks as I did when the market was at an all-time high a month ago. The only other slight change I am making is I was originally going to have my year one retirement spending in cash already, so I don't have to touch my portfolio for a year. Now I'm looking to actually save 2 years in cash. So with those 2 years, and then the dividends that I'll be receiving from my taxable account, I actually won't have to touch my portfolio at all until 3 years from when we're recording this, so March 2023. So yeah, just having that extra buffer, and hopefully the market will be a little higher in 3 years than it is right now. And if not, I still have got a couple decades of savings that I can live off of.
So it sounds like you are not changing your plan of when you're going to retire unless, for example, your post-retirement plans completely go away with us, having no ability to travel still in September. So that's really promising to hear. And you're also just getting ever so slightly more conservative with your cash cushion to be prepared for the possibility that you're going to need access to that cash for 2 full years instead of just 1 after retirement.
Exactly. And that was actually based on the current vaccine timelines that we have now. So just knowing that it's possible we shouldn't be traveling for 2 years until we have the vaccine and can give it to everyone. So that was the impetus for the 2 years instead of 1.
That's really smart. Now, you experienced some serious volatility with your net worth and how your assets were going up and down during this, market downturn. We had a serious drop one day. We had a really big gain the next day. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and particularly the emotional side of it? How did you feel when you experienced that first big loss?
I am shocked to report that I felt fine, and that is not at all what I expected. I've been on this journey for over 5 years now. I've been reading all the books and blogs about it. And so, reading those, I fully expected to be like everyone else that I had read and feel that emotionally or feel, oh no, I lost 3 years of savings right there in one moment, which did happen on one of the days. So, yeah, I expected that, but I guess I got through to my lizard brain because I really didn't feel anything, and that was really weird.
I think it might be something that you had mentioned previously, which is exposure therapy, where you do consistently check your balance and your stocks. So you check daily, which means that you are always exposed to market volatility. Whatever happens to your stocks, you are always seeing the changes, whether it's good, which say 2017, I'm sure that was a real easy year, right? It was going up and up and up. But in 2018, in quarter 4, you experienced that big December drop where everyone was saying, we're going back into a recession. Of course, we didn't. So you kind of saw we went down, we came back up in January, we were up higher than we were before the drop in December. So I think that exposure therapy might have factored into that. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but having some, I don't know, psychological experience and emotional experience with seeing your money fluctuate may have prepared you well for this situation.
No, I think you're completely right, especially since same timeline. I've been looking at my money daily for over 5 years. And 5 years ago, I had $50,000 that I was watching go up and down by a couple percent every day. And now when I'm getting closer to $500,000, originally I'm seeing it fluctuate by, a couple hundred, 1,000, whatever. And then it's slowly getting bigger until I'm seeing myself, quote unquote, lose $30,000 in a day. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. You're right.
And when you were originally going to retire, your 5-year plan there was to have $500,000 in the bank invested so that you would have that amount of money to draw down. Does it look like you're going to be hitting that exact number?
Not right now, assuming we don't have a huge gain. Since we're right now, I think we're down 18% for the year. And I checked my portfolio yesterday, it was at $375,000. And I'm looking to save about another $50,000. So if we remain the same, I'm not going to hit my goal exactly. And if we go down, obviously I won't. However, that $500,000 actually was already a buffer amount. So last year I spent a little under $18,000, and I was projecting in retirement spending closer to $19,000 to give myself some wiggle room with additional medical expenses. So if we are taking that and looking at general fire rules 25 times, that's actually $475,000. And I did hit that number. So if we are thinking I'm a mindless fire drone and once you hit the number, whatever happens, you quit, I hit it. So if we're doing that, I've quote unquote reached my goal technically, just not everything that I was hoping for. But I think we talked about this a little in the other episode, but I have a lot of contingencies in my plan. There's a reason that I'm comfortable on this quote unquote lean number, not just that my spending is low, but that I have absolutely no fixed expenses, no house, no car, no kids, no pets. I also am planning to, like I said, geo arbitrage either domestically or internationally to have the same awesome life for less on a beach in Mexico, for example. And then also I'm open to making money. I'm actually accidentally making money right now. I think it was $1,000 without basically doing anything extra last year. And it's looking like, be a couple extra $1,000 this year. And that's just for little side hobbies that don't take any time that I enjoy. So if that trend continues, I might be kicking myself for not quitting even earlier.
That's really great. So how can someone factor financial resiliency and, risk management into their early retirement plans like you did?
Well, I use a really helpful tool online called cfiresim.com, see the letter, and they allow you to have more flexibility basically in planning something like a long retirement. Most calculators tell you, oh, you're going to retire with a 60-40 stock bond split and you're going to be retired for 30 years. And so this is how much money you need. They also assume with a lot of those calculators that you spend everything you earn. So they ask for your income and not your spending, which I'm like, That's an interesting assumption.
Doesn't work for FIRE folks, yeah.
Does not work for us. So CFIRE allows you to put in different factors such as I am going to decrease my spending a couple $1,000s in a recession scenario, or I'm going to earn an extra $1,000 a year. And since I don't spend that much, that has actually a huge impact on my success rates. And then they basically assume what would happen if you retired at every year in the past 150 years with X timeline. So for me, that would be a 70-year window. And given where I am right now, even with my current deflated numbers, I still would have been fine if I retired in 1929, the start of the Great Depression. So flexibility really is key, especially since I'm looking at hopefully a 70-year retirement.
And are you looking to decrease your expenses in the beginning of your retirement in order to adjust for sequence of returns risk?
So I'm still debating that only because I will already have that spending in cash. So instead of usually you would decrease your spending so that you are pulling out less from the market at a downturn, but I'll already have it. So really, we'll see. I guess it depends on what the world looks like. If I'm domestic geo arbitraging, then my spending will already go down because I won't be living in the middle of a metropolis like Seattle, like I am now. I'm not requiring myself to do so. That would be the plan, though, going forward in 3 years or so when I need to take out more money if we're still in a recession.
And that's another argument for having a really large cash cushion when you do retire. That will help you manage and hedge against sequence of returns risk. If you retire in a down market, you don't actually have to be accessing any of your retirement investments until a couple of years when you use up that cash cushion. And hopefully at that point, the economy has recovered. Right? We can't predict when it's going to, but we do know that the economy always recovers, even after something like the Great Depression, which this is, I see people comparing it, but this is not a similar or akin event. It's not even that similar to the 2008 recession. It's a little bit more similar to like the dot-com bubble, which people our age didn't even, were hardly alive for, much less had money in the stock market. So you mentioned that you're in the Seattle area, which was the epicenter in the United States of the coronavirus outbreak. So what was that like? Just give me a little insight into being kind of the first affected area.
I mean, I can't compare it to anything, but I have routinely been very impressed with how our state has been handling this, actually. So we had the first cases, we had the first deaths, unfortunately, of COVID-19, and our governor immediately was talking about social distancing, started locking down things. This is our, I believe, 5th week of self-quarantine. So we started before anyone, I think.
About 2 weeks before anyone else.
And I was reading a New York Times article today, actually, that our cases and deaths are slowing down and starting to flatten the curve, which is awesome. And obviously not the end, but it seems like our early response is helping, and we just need to keep going and squash this thing.
Flatten the curve is really important, and the social distancing is important. Were you feeling any amount of frustration when you were experiencing the coronavirus in a very serious way before the rest of the United States and including the federal government were taking it seriously?
Oh, yeah. There's some frustration. I mean, obviously, we were in a little bit of a different situation. Some states and cities had not even seen their first cases, so I can understand how it might be a little more blasé about it. But yeah, our numbers were climbing. Originally, I believe the first death was in a elderly home right outside of Seattle, which has had more deaths than any other area around us, which is just heartbreaking. So yeah, that's hard to see, but it seems like, unfortunately, the whole country is being affected now. And overall, it seems like people are taking it seriously.
I think so too. And I wish that we could have learned in those 2 weeks from Seattle before we had to wait another 2 weeks. I'm on the East Coast to really, really take it seriously because there's quite a lag there. But I live quite close to New York City, or rather New York State is experiencing a huge influx of new cases on a daily basis. Is there any advice that you would give someone who's making an early retirement plan right now and thinks this might not be possible anymore because the economy just, quote unquote, tanked, or all these like really terrible negative sounding headlines that we're seeing?
I would say do your research. So, for example, a lot of data has made me more comfortable with my plan, specifically seeing even in the absolute worst case scenarios, Great Depression, Great Recession, dot-com bubble, usually the economy completely recovers and hits those all-time highs in about 1 to 2 years, which is ridiculous. So right now we're talking about the sky is falling. In some cases it is. Let's let's get people safe and healthy. But it always feels like the sky is falling. Like I was reading headlines from the Great Recession, and this is the end of the economy. Banks are tanking. Like we're going to go and I don't know, toilet paper is the new currency or whatever.
People are trading toilet paper for food.
Exactly. So it seems like it always feels that way. So this is just the next Black Swan event that will feel like the end of the world, but we will come out resilient. And if we don't, then, aliens have invaded and we're all dead anyway. So it's fine.
That's the alternative. So we're doing pretty good right now. We can still retire into an alien-free world.
I think we are. Fingers crossed. Or hostile aliens. If you're friendly, come on over.
Yeah, we'll say hi. You know that from The Sims.
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on The Sims.
You need to stream it on Twitch or something. I feel like we would watch. You do stream it on Twitch?
Yes. I'll send you the link.
Yes, send me the link. I'll check it out.
It's actually called Sims on Fire, and me and Fetching Financial Freedom streamed together, and we created houses with personal finance bloggers in them.
No way. Okay. Everybody has to check this out.
Yeah, we need to figure out how to do a social distancing Twitch stream, though, because usually we were in person.
I bet there's a way where 2 people can do it.
I'm sure there is. We just need to figure it out. But I do believe videos of our past streams, and there's 5 or 10 of them, are still up on Twitch. So check that out. Sims on Fire.
That's so great. So I'm glad to hear that your retirement plans are still going at full steam ahead. Really no huge negative impacts. You're not giving up on financial independence, retire early, which is good to hear. And I think that kind of just shows that building in the amount of flexibility that you have in your plan is really important. Being more conservative with your number than the absolute bare minimum, as well as having a cash cushion instead of just planning to take disbursements immediately after you retire, as well as if you have low living expenses like you do, making a little bit of extra money or decreasing your living expenses a little bit makes a huge impact. So for people who are looking to go kind of the quote unquote lean fire route, you have the ability to kind of swing your income up or your expenses down in a much more meaningful way with just a couple $1,000s.
Exactly. And even thinking about the worst case scenarios, I think is helpful. So if this happened, what would I do? And my absolute worst case scenario is somehow the stock market goes to zero, which, as I said, can't happen unless the aliens have invaded. And what do I have to do? I then could go back to my very first entry-level job where I made $35,000 a year that I had a decade ago and still pay all my bills. So that's really not that bad.
And that's worst case scenario. In the case that it's not even realistic, you would have to go back into an entry-level job because now you have experience, you have work experience. So there's something called fear setting that Tim Ferriss talks about, where you basically imagine the worst case scenario. And then you figure out what you would do in that situation to mitigate the impact of that worst case scenario. And you can do this financially, but you can also do it, emotionally in your life. It would be really difficult if you lost your job, your partner lost his job, somebody that that you're close to dies, and you have to put up cash for a funeral or something like that. And then you say, okay, well, how would I handle this? Let me put together an action plan. Let me see if we really would be okay, or if there's something I can do to prepare for this, to be a little bit more in a better situation if worst case does happen. And that's a way to get over the anxiety that a lot of us are feeling around this whole uncontrollable situation, that there are very few things that we can do besides staying in our homes. So I would recommend trying the fear setting activity as well to examine that worst case scenario, what it actually looks like, put a name on it, and then put some solutions towards it.
I love it. Planning this stuff out, even in weird scenarios.
Money nerds, planning nerds. That's what we do. So how long have you been working from home?
About 3.5 years now.
And you also live with someone who works from home full time, right?
I do. And he has worked from home his entire career. So that's almost a decade.
Okay, so there are two main things. One is, how do you get yourself like out of bed in the morning and productive at your work when you're at home with all of those distractions? And I'll ask you the second one next.
So I am very fortunate that working from home actually really works for me and my work style. So I actually don't have a problem not being distracted. For example, I try not to do home tasks during my work hours. So I don't usually do the dishwasher or like cook large meals outside of my lunch hour. So I kind of have that separation. I also have a separate desk area, as does my partner, where we go to do our work and our backs are to each other. So we can't like, hey, what are you doing? And we also have I think of it as a palace since we used to live in a studio, but it's a 1 bedroom. So if we both have calls at the same time, which is very rare, we do have a door that we can close. And there's a desk in the bedroom as well. So just having that space and not letting yourself get distracted if possible, and having that kind of work time versus home time mindset.
And how do you like turn that off at the end of the day? Because you're in the same environment, you're in the same space. Is it hard for you to have that hard stop, at 5 or 6 p.m., whenever that is for you?
It's not hard for me, but that I think is linked to as I've progressed in my fire journey, I've created more and more boundaries at work. So about 2 years ago, I started turning off my work email on my phone. So at 5 p.m., unless there's some extenuating circumstances, like this morning I had to get up at 5:30 for a client, but that's extremely rare. Except in those weird circumstances, I'm gone and they don't expect to hear from me because they don't. So I kind of set that boundary. And so when I close my computer, it's over and I can go empty the dishwasher and do whatever other home stuff that I want to do. And then also having that space difference, this desk that I'm sitting at talking to you, I only come here when I'm working. So if I'm not sitting here, I'm not doing it.
Right. So that's another question. Do you work from bed? Do you work on the couch? Or do you keep your work specifically at that desk and then do the rest of your life in the other areas of your home?
I usually do, but I actually love couch life. So sometimes I do work from the couch, but I don't think of it as a workspace. So like this desk is my workspace. And so if I'm here, I'm definitely working. And if I'm on the couch, it's more of a rare situation.
So my second question was, two people at home. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but how do you keep yourself from like wanting to kill each other when you're trying to get your work done? You're spending a lot of time together, whereas a lot of people will spend more time with their coworkers than they will with their spouse when living in the same home. How do you make that work?
I picked a partner I like. No, I'm kidding.
That's a great answer. Maybe if you're having a ton of tension, you got to work through some stuff.
I also think it helps that we have been together for 11 years, I think. So we've had a lot of time to figure out what annoys us about each other and help mitigate that. We also, as I mentioned, used to live in a studio together. So this does feel like a palace. I have a door I can close and all that good stuff. But yeah, basically during work hours, we stay out of each other's way. But it is very helpful. Like you said, you usually spend more time with coworkers than the people you love, which is ridiculous. But if I have a really hard call with a client that like almost makes me cry or something, then I can go get a hug from my partner and be like, okay, deep breaths, make some coffee, like let's chill for a second, which really helps. And obviously also helps keep things in perspective because office fires are not as serious as they seem to be.
That's a really good point. And so I'm hearing that you have boundaries with each other as well. So you have boundaries with work. You can't contact me outside of work hours unless it's actually a serious emergency. You have boundaries around your workspace, but you also know what you can and can't do. You're not popping over to ask him about an unwork related kind of issue during his work hours and vice versa for you. And that really helps. I think it's cool to hear though that, you are spending more time with each other than you are with your coworkers. And that can really help like strengthen a relationship, but also align the way that you spend your time with your values and the things that you want to do. I know a lot of people are being thrown into working from home right now, and it feels really disconcerting and almost like upsetting because this paradigm is like completely flipped on its head. You spend way more time with your family and way less time with your coworkers. But ultimately, I think people who successfully work from home, like you, show that you don't need constant contact with your coworkers to be successful at your job. and you can live and work and spend almost all your time together, especially in quarantine now. You've been doing it for 5 weeks with your partner and not kill each other.
Exactly.
And have it be a bonus to your relationship where you can, if you need support from each other, you can get that in the middle of the day. You can eat lunch together if you want to, instead of taking that lunch break in front of your computer, checking your email, at your desk in a cubicle farm, right?
It's great. It really works for my personality and his. We're loving it.
Okay, so do you want to share another hack with me about how you manage your time while you're working?
Yes, I like to bracket my time and give myself little challenges. For example, if I have all day to do something, I might just put it off or procrastinate with other work items. But if I have a call, for example, in an hour, I say to myself, can I get this list of 5 things done in an hour? Let's see. Ooh, how exciting. And usually I can when I think originally, oh, that'll take too long, or oh, I shouldn't get into that. Just giving myself a little challenge throughout the day helps.
So that's actually using Parkinsons Law to your advantage. And Parkinsons Law says that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So if you're able to challenge yourself to get something done in a really small period of time, the work can only expand so much into that hour. And then you have that hard stop for the call or whatever meeting is butting up against it. I think that's a super smart way to manage your time.
It's really helpful because I do have a lot of calls. So it basically breaks up my day. And then I just have little sprints of work in between.
That's a great way to think of it too, as, sprints of focused work, and then you have the client facing work that you have to do or the team facing work. How do you interact with your coworkers? What method do you use for that?
We're all over the place. We're mostly on email, also Microsoft Teams. Some people use Slack. So we're all over the place. But like I said, I have worked from home for about 3.5 years. So we have found a rhythm that's pretty easy. If I really need to talk to someone, we just hop on a quick call. It actually is a little faster than me like trying to find someone in a building. And you can still have that interaction. If you need, we can video chat, we can screen share. It works really well for me. I don't see a huge difference compared to when I would work in an office face to face with people.
Is your whole team remote, or do some people work from an office?
So we do have a co-working space that you can go to outside of a global pandemic if you want, but it's always been kind of a running joke that I never go to the office ever. Like we have a monthly company meeting and you will see me there, and otherwise they'll be like, Purple, I haven't seen you a bit. I'm like, yep.
Because working from the co-working space is completely optional?
Yes.
Great. Hey, take that option if you have it. And now I feel like in this working from home situation that we've all found ourselves thrown into, people who were told they could not telework, that their job was not possible to do from home and they had to have their butt in their chair in their office, are finding out that it's true. If you have to, you can. And in fact, there are some ways to make it like really efficient. So I'm hoping to see that more people are allowed to telework or given this option. And since it's an option, you can take advantage of it as much as you want. I like your philosophy now that you're getting closer to retirement.
I care less about stupid office politics. I still work very hard to do my job well. But things like worrying about FaceTime or someone's offhanded comment that they didn't see me for a month, yeah, that doesn't matter. It doesn't faze me.
And it doesn't affect your work quality, which is what you were hired to do. So that's a really great thing too. I think hopefully more people can take that back as a positive out of this negative situation that we're in and create a better balance with their work and their life and be able to set better boundaries too. I think we all are being forced to practice boundary setting, especially with having so many people at home or having work at home when there feels like there's no line between when we're working and when we're living. So thank you for sharing your experience with that.
Yeah, thanks for chatting with me.
So good chatting with you, catching up. I'm glad that your plans are on track. Thanks for being on the podcast. You can learn more about Purple's story at apurplelife.com and on Instagram at apurplelife and Twitter at apurplelifeblog. To check out the show notes for this episode, which includes links to resources mentioned in today's interview and where you can learn more about Purple, go to 20free.co/episode 16. That's the word 20, FREE.co/episode 16. I want this to be more than just a podcast for listening to, so I'm making it a do-cast, where you're getting information from the podcast that you can take action on to create real outcomes in your life. I call these power moves. If you implement even one of these tactics into your life, you're taking a powerful step towards finding your freedom. What are some power moves we learned from this conversation? Here are 7. Power move number 1. Keep early retirement flexible. Early retirement doesn't have to mean a strict departure from paying work forever. There can be flexibility in your plan to possibly work again in the future or to earn money from your passions. Like Purple mentioned about her own retirement, if the economy really doesn't allow for full retirement, she might be looking at a sabbatical, fun employment, or simply just living off of decades of savings. Keep your early retirement plans flexible and you'll be able to adapt to changing and unexpected circumstances, even if a recession comes in the same year you retire or a global pandemic and health crisis occurs. Power move number 2. Remember, the market will recover. The market always recovers. Therefore, it's important to remember that while the economy isn't looking so great right now, we can plan for it to look better in the future. If you are investing for the long term, this short-term recession should not have major effects on your plans. Purple mentioned that while she has less money on paper, she still has the same number of stocks. If you don't sell your investments at a loss while the market is low and you wait for the recovery, you can get back on track. Power move number 3. Save a big cash cushion. When it comes to early retirement, having a large cash cushion is really important. It helps hedge against the sequence of returns risk, which is the outsized negative impacts that a retiree's portfolio will experience if the person retires and starts withdrawing from their portfolio in a low return year or several years. That means that retiring into a recession and immediately drawing down your portfolio will negatively impact your overall portfolio performance for the rest of your retirement. Having a 1 or 2 year cash cushion will allow you to cover your expenses for the first few years of retirement without having to sell any of your investments at a loss. That way, you can wait for the market to recover and avoid those long-term negative impacts. Power move number 4. Get used to market volatility. If you're invested in the stock market, you're going to experience volatility. Volatility is the up and down market movement. It's calculated as a standard deviation from the expectation. You can be invested in high or low volatility assets, but with either, you are likely seeing a change in the value of your investments right now. When the market quote-unquote crashes, this can lead people to make reactionary decisions about their investments. To avoid making mistakes that will cost you money, you can get used to market volatility. One method is by exposure therapy. Checking your balances daily as soon as you start investing means you will see swings in the value of your portfolio when you're invested in smaller amounts. You will get used to seeing a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 swings in the value of your portfolio and can then build up your tolerance to stomaching 5-figure or larger swings. Purple used exposure therapy by looking at her balance daily for the past 5 years, and so seeing her portfolio decrease by multiple 5 figures didn't bother her at all. The other method is by fully committing to your long-term investment plan. I personally do not check my investments very often at all. This is because that money is invested for the long term, and so short-term volatility doesn't matter when it comes to long-term investments. As a long-term investor, I understand that volatility will always occur to some degree, and I am mentally prepared to deal with it without deviating from my long-term plan. Power move number 5. Do your research. Before retiring early, you have to do your research. Run your numbers and plan for unexpected issues to make sure that you are financially prepared to walk away from your income source. Purple says one of the reasons she feels so confident retiring, even in a recession, is that she's done a lot of research. Run all of your numbers, including expenses, inflation, investments, and expected returns, through a calculator such as FYF, which I'll link to in the show notes for this episode. This simulator will tell you whether your plan would have worked during all of the past recessions or depressions. Though past performance is no guarantee of future performance, testing your circumstances against the worst-case scenario is always a good idea. Power move number 6. Create contingency plans. Have a few backup plans. What will you do if the market crashes right before you retire? What will you do if there's a global pandemic and you can't go on your full-time travel adventures that you were planning? Purple explains that she has a bunch of contingency plans. Since her spending is low, decreasing it even further has a large effect on her overall financial projections. She doesn't have any fixed expenses like a house, car, kids, or pets. She is planning to utilize geo-arbitrage to live the same awesome life for less. What plans B, C, and D can you come up with that could replace plan A if needed? Power move number 7. Practice fear setting. Fear setting is a practice coined by Tim Ferriss of the 4-Hour Workweek. In this practice, you imagine the worst-case scenario. You specify what could happen, and by doing so, you make your fear concrete. Now that your fear is named and specific, you can put together an action plan. You can decide what you can do to prepare for it. You can think creatively about how you could avoid it altogether or fix it if it did happen. You can decide whether you would really be okay if your worst case scenario came true. This practice is a good way to soothe the anxiety that a lot of us are feeling right now. That is the 7th and final power move from my conversation with a Purple Life about retiring during a recession. You can also find a free download with a summary of some work from home tips in the show notes at www.20free.co/episode 16. That's the word 20, FREE.co. Need someone to talk to about recent changes in your finances due to COVID-19? Connect with me on a free 10-minute coaching call at 20free.co/moneycoaching, and we'll discuss how I can help. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Find Your Freedom podcast on whatever app you're using to listen to this episode. Do me a favor and also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to 20free.co/iTunes to be redirected to the page on Apple Podcasts where you can leave your rating and review. I really appreciate it. If you think this episode would help someone you know, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. My name is Becky. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at 20freeco and sign up for free resources and email updates at www.20free.co. That's the word 20, FREE.co. I'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast.